Our miracle baby brought unimaginable joy, but an unexpected phone call twisted that joy into terror, revealing a secret about my husband that was far more devastating than any diagnosis. The tiny, flickering black and white image on the screen was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It looked like a little bean, a cosmic shrimp swimming in the vast, safe darkness of my womb. And then the sound, a frantic, rhythmic thump-thump-thump, filled the quiet, sterile room. It was the sound of a hummingbird's wings, the sound of a galloping horse, the sound of pure, unadulterated life. I squeezed my husband Mark's hand, my eyes welling up with tears. He squeezed back, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on my knuckles. I risked a glance at him. His face, usually so composed and steady, was a mask of sheer awe. A single tear traced a path down his cheek, and he didn't even bother to wipe it away. He was completely captivated. "Everything looks perfect, folks," the sonographer said, her voice warm and cheerful. "Heartbeat is strong and steady at 165 beats per minute. Size is right on track for 10 weeks. You've got a healthy little tenant in there." Mark let out a shaky breath, a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Healthy?" he whispered, leaning down to kiss my forehead. "Did you hear that, Sarah? Perfect and healthy." For the past 2 years, perfect and healthy was all we had wished for. Our journey to this moment had been a painful one, paved with negative tests, quiet disappointments, and the kind of grief that you can't really share with anyone who hasn't been through it. Mark had been my rock. He held me through every tearful night, celebrated every tiny glimmer of hope, and never once let me feel like I was broken. He was the kind of husband my friends envied, thoughtful, supportive, and so deeply in love with me that it sometimes felt like a tangible thing, a warm blanket I could wrap myself in. When we finally saw those 2 pink lines, he'd lifted me off the ground and spun me around the bathroom, laughing with a joy so pure it felt sacred. Seeing him now, staring at our baby on the screen, I felt my heart swell to a size I didn't think was possible. My life was finally, unequivocally perfect. We left the clinic clutching a strip of grainy photos, our own personal works of art. We couldn't stop looking at them. In the car, at a red light, Mark held one up to the sunlight. "I think he has your nose," he said with a grin. "It's a bean, Mark. It doesn't even have a nose yet." I laughed, feeling giddy. "And how do you know it's a he?" "Just a feeling," he said, his eyes sparkling. "A strong, stubborn little guy, just like his mom." The rest of the day was a blissful haze. We called our parents, their screams of excitement echoing through the phone. We debated names, we planned the nursery, we talked directly to my still flat stomach, making silly promises to the little bean inside. It felt like the first day of the rest of our lives. Mark made my favorite dinner, pasta carbonara, and we ate on the couch, watching a dumb comedy and just enjoying the feeling of being a family of 3. As I was drifting off to sleep that night, curled up against his chest, I remember thinking that I had never, in my entire life, felt so safe, so happy, so utterly content. The next afternoon, that feeling shattered into a million pieces. I was at my desk, trying to focus on a work report, but mostly just daydreaming and scrolling through baby websites, when my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but the area code was local. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello, may I speak with Sarah Jensen?" A crisp, professional voice asked. "This is she," I said. "Sarah, this is Dr. Miller's office calling. Dr. Miller was the overseeing radiologist for your ultrasound yesterday." My stomach immediately clenched. An icy dread washed over me. Why was the doctor's office calling? The sonographer said everything was perfect. Is everything okay? With the baby? My voice was a thin, reedy whisper. "The baby is fine, Mrs. Jensen. The images show a perfectly healthy fetus, and all your levels are normal." I let out a huge sigh of relief, slumping back in my chair. "Oh, thank God. You really scared me for a second." "I apologize," the receptionist said, though her tone didn't soften. "Dr. Miller does need to speak with you, however. She has a few questions about your medical intake forms. Can you hold for a moment?" Before I could even process what that meant, I was on hold. The bland, instrumental music did nothing to soothe my frayed nerves. What questions? I'd filled out those forms meticulously. Family history, allergies, medications. I went over every line in my head. What could I have missed? A few moments later, a new voice came on the line. It was deeper, more serious. Mrs. Jensen? This is Dr. Miller. Hello, doctor. The receptionist said you had a question about my forms. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a beat of silence that felt heavy and suffocating. Not exactly, Mrs. Jensen. Something came up during our review. It's a delicate matter. I need you to come into the office as soon as you can. The ice in my stomach spread to my chest. A delicate matter? What are you talking about? Is it me? Is something wrong with me? I can't discuss this over the phone, she said, her voice firm but not unkind. It's imperative we speak in person. Can you come in today? My mind was racing, a chaotic storm of worst-case scenarios. An undiagnosed tumor? A rare genetic marker? Yes, I can leave work right now. I'll just call my husband, Mark, and we'll be there in 30 minutes. No, the doctor said, and the word was so sharp, so absolute, it was like a slap in the face. Mrs. Jensen, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You must come alone. Do not tell your husband you are coming here. Do not tell him I called. This is about your husband. The world tilted on its axis. The words echoed in the sudden, deafening silence of my office cubicle, a high-pitched ringing in my ears blocking out the mundane sounds of keyboards clicking and phones ringing. Come alone. This is about your husband. My mind, which only moments before had been filled with fluffy clouds of baby names and nursery colors, was now a frantic storm of terrifying possibilities. An affair? A secret family? A criminal past? Why would a radiologist, a doctor who had looked inside my body, be the one to deliver this kind of news? It made no sense. My hand was shaking so badly I had to use the other to steady it as I fumbled to type a text to Mark. My fingers hovered over the screen. What could I possibly say? Every excuse felt flimsy and transparent. In the end, I settled on the most corporate, boring lie I could think of. Hey honey, something urgent came up with the Q3 financials. My boss just called me into a last-minute meeting downtown. Might be a couple of hours. Don't wait up for dinner. Love you. Felt like typing a betrayal. He replied almost instantly with a string of supportive emojis and a "Go get superstar. Call me when you're done. Love you more." The casual sweetness of it was like a knife in my gut. The drive to the clinic was a blur. I don't remember the traffic or the route I took. My brain was a whirlwind, replaying every moment of the last few years, searching for a crack in the perfect facade of our life. There were none. Mark was the most honest, transparent person I knew. He was an open book. He still told me about his silly childhood crushes, his insecurities about his job, his fear of spiders. We shared everything. This had to be a mistake. Colossal, horrifying mistake. Maybe they had him confused with another Mark Jensen. Maybe he'd listed a family medical condition on the intake form that he'd forgotten to tell me about. Something embarrassing but benign. Yes, that had to be it. I clung to that thought like a life raft in a churning sea of dread. When I walked back into the clinic, the cheerful, pastel-colored waiting room from yesterday felt different. Sinister. The photos of smiling babies on the walls seemed to mock me. The receptionist from the phone called my name without even looking up, her face a neutral mask. She led me down a different hallway this time, away from the ultrasound rooms and into a more clinical, administrative-looking area. She stopped at a heavy wooden door with a small brass plaque that read, Dr. Alana Miller, MD, Head of Diagnostic Imaging. My heart hammered against my ribs as she knocked once and opened the door, gesturing for me to enter. Dr. Miller's office was quiet and intimidating. Bookshelves filled with thick medical textbooks lined one wall, and framed diplomas covered another. She was sitting behind a large mahogany desk, her computer monitor angled away from me. She looked to be in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wasn't smiling. Mrs. Jensen, thank you for coming in so quickly. Please have a seat. I sat on the edge of the leather chair opposite her. My hands clenched so tightly in my lap my knuckles were white. Doctor, please, you have to tell me what's going on. I've been imagining the worst. She folded her hands on the desk, her gaze direct and unwavering. It wasn't cold, but it was intensely serious. First, let me reiterate what my staff told you on the phone. Your pregnancy is, by all indications, perfectly healthy. Your baby is developing exactly as it should be. This has nothing to do with your health or the health of your child. I need you to be very clear on that. I nodded, unable to speak. A small measure of relief warred with the overwhelming anxiety. Yesterday, she continued, during your transabdominal ultrasound, our sonographer, Judy, did a wonderful job. She captured all the necessary images of the fetus, the uterus, the ovaries. As I'm sure you remember, your husband was in the room with you. Yes, I whispered. He was right beside me, holding my hand. He was, she confirmed. And at one point, I believe around the time Judy was trying to get a clear shot of the fetal pole, he leaned over you, didn't he? To get a better look at the screen. A memory surfaced through the fog of my panic. He'd leaned over my stomach, his face close to mine, whispering, "Look at our little miracle." His other hand had rested gently on my side. Yes, he did. Dr. Miller took a deep breath. It was the first sign of anything other than calm professionalism, and it terrified me. She swiveled her monitor around to face me. What we do in diagnostic imaging, Mrs. Jensen, is paint pictures with sound waves. The probe sends out signals, and the machine interprets the echoes that bounce back to create an image. It's an imprecise science in some ways. Sometimes we capture things we aren't looking for. We call them incidental findings. On the screen was a grainy, black and white image, just like the ones of my baby. But this wasn't my baby. It wasn't my uterus or my ovaries. It was an amorphous shape, a cross-section of something. It was unfamiliar, alien. The ultrasound probe has a wide field of view, she explained, using a pen to point at the screen. When your husband leaned over, the probe was pressed against your lower right side. For a split second, it seems the sound waves passed through your abdominal wall and captured a partial, but surprisingly clear, image of the organ that was directly underneath his ribs, pressed up against you. She moved the pen to a specific area on the image. It was a large, kidney bean-shaped object, but a significant portion of it was consumed by a sprawling, dark mass. The mass was huge, angry-looking even in grayscale, with jagged, irregular borders that seemed to claw into the healthier tissue around it. Mrs. Jensen, Dr. Miller said, her voice dropping to a low, somber tone. We believe this is an image of your husband's right kidney, and this mass, based on its size, its vascularity, and its heterogeneous texture, it has all the classic hallmarks of a stage 4 renal cell carcinoma. A very large, very aggressive tumor that, judging by its appearance, has been growing undetected for a very long time. The air in the room seemed to vanish. I stared at the dark, sprawling mass on the screen, a monster hidden in grayscale, and my brain simply refused to process it. It was like looking at a foreign language, a collection of symbols with no meaning. Renal cell carcinoma. Stage 4. Aggressive. The words were just sounds, hollow and clinical, stripped of their terrifying power by the sheer shock of it all. I felt a strange, detached calm wash over me, the kind that precedes a total collapse. I don't understand. I finally managed to stammer, my voice sounding like it was coming from a great distance. You're saying, from the ultrasound of our baby. You saw this? Inside my husband. Dr. Miller nodded slowly, her eyes full of a grave pity that I couldn't yet accept. It's what we call a fortuitous finding, though I'm not sure that word applies here. It was a 1 in a million chance. The angle, the pressure, the timing. It was a perfect and perfectly horrible coincidence. If he hadn't leaned over at that exact moment, we would have seen nothing. We would have sent you home with your happy news and no one would be the wiser. But it could be a mistake, right? The plea was desperate, childish. Ultrasounds are grainy. It could be a shadow, a cyst, anything. Mrs. Jensen, she said gently, but with an unmistakable finality in her voice that crushed my fledgling hope. I have been a radiologist for 30 years. I have looked at tens of thousands of kidneys. I know what a simple cyst looks like. I know what a benign angiomyolipoma looks like. This is not that. The size alone is alarming. And you see these tendrils here. She pointed with her pen to the jagged edges. This suggests local invasion. I cannot give you a definitive diagnosis, only a biopsy can do that, but I can tell you with a very high degree of certainty that your husband is a very sick man, and he likely has no idea. The detached calm shattered, and the roaring began in my ears. He wasn't sick. He was the picture of health. He ran 5 miles every morning. He hadn't taken a sick day from work in 3 years. He had just carried 3 heavy boxes of baby furniture up 2 flights of stairs last weekend without breaking a sweat. There were no symptoms. No pain, no weight loss, no fatigue. Nothing. Why are you telling me? I choked out, the question tearing from my throat. Why didn't you call him? He's the patient. Because legally, he's not my patient, she explained, her expression tight with the ethical weight of her decision. You are. I have no right to contact him. No right to access his medical information or even acknowledge his existence in a clinical setting. To do so would be a massive violation of privacy laws. But morally, she trailed off, looking from my face to my still flat stomach. Morally, I couldn't live with myself if I said nothing. I saw the 2 of you yesterday. I saw the look on his face when he heard that heartbeat. I have a responsibility to my patient, and right now my patient is you, and you are carrying his child. You needed to know. You are the only one I could tell. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. On it were 2 names and phone numbers. This is Dr. Evans. He's the best urological oncologist in the city. And this is Dr. Singh, a general practitioner who can get you an immediate referral for the necessary scans, a CT with contrast, to start. You need to get your husband to see one of them. Not next week, not tomorrow. Today, if possible. Time is of the essence. I stared at the paper, the names blurring through my tears. This was real. This was happening. My perfect life, my perfect husband, our perfect little bean. It was all balanced on the edge of a knife. The doctor was giving me a script for a play I didn't know how to perform, a role I could never have imagined. I was no longer just a wife and an expectant mother. I was now the keeper of a catastrophic secret. I don't remember leaving her office or walking to my car. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in the driver's seat in the parking garage, the strip of ultrasound photos from yesterday still on the passenger seat. I picked one up. The little bean. Our miracle. A child that might never know its father. A sob tore through me, a raw, ragged sound of such profound grief that it frightened me. I cried until my head pounded and my eyes were swollen shut, until there were no tears left. Then, a cold, hard resolve began to form in the pit of my stomach. Dr. Miller was right. I was the only one who could do this. I had to be strong. For Mark. For our baby. The drive home was a slow-motion nightmare. Every laughing couple I saw on the street, every father pushing a stroller, felt like a personal attack. When I pulled into our driveway, I saw Mark through the living room window. He was on the phone, pacing back and forth, a huge, goofy grin on his face. My heart sank. He was probably telling another one of his friends about the baby. He was living in our perfect yesterday, while I was trapped in this horrific today. I took a deep breath, wiped my eyes, and forced my face into a neutral expression before walking inside. He hung up the phone the moment he saw me. There she is, the financial wizard, he said, striding over to wrap me in a hug. I flinched, my body stiff and unresponsive. He pulled back immediately, his smile faltering. His eyes scanned my face, and the joyful light in them dimmed, replaced by a deep, immediate concern. He knew me too well. Sarah? What is it? He asked, his voice soft. Did the meeting go badly? You look like you've seen a ghost. I opened my mouth to deliver the lie I'd rehearsed in the car. Something about a stressful project and a demanding boss. But looking into his loving, worried face, the lie wouldn't come. The truth was a physical thing, a jagged stone lodged in my throat. All I could do was shake my head as the first fresh tear spilled over and traced a path down my cheek. "Honey, you're scaring me," he said, his hands coming up to cup my face. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. Just tell me, what's wrong?" "Mark," I began, my voice cracking on his name. The rehearsed speeches, the gentle preambles, they all evaporated in the face of his earnest, loving gaze. There was no easy way to say it. There was no way to soften a cannonball. "We need to go to the hospital. Right now." His thumbs stroked my cheeks, wiping away the tears as they fell. Confusion knitted his brow. "The hospital? Why? Is it the baby? Did you feel a pain? Are you bleeding?" The questions came in a rapid-fire burst, his concern escalating with every word. "No, no," I said quickly, shaking my head and grabbing his hands to still them. "The baby is fine. It's not about the baby. It's about you." He let out a short, confused laugh. "Me? I feel great. Never been better." "What are you talking about, Sarah? How do you tell the healthiest person you know that they're dying? How do you explain a one-in-a-million fluke of physics and biology?" I pulled the piece of paper from my purse, my hand trembling so much it looked like a leaf in the wind. I unfolded it and held it out to him. "A doctor called me from the clinic yesterday. The radiologist. She saw something." He took the paper, his eyes scanning the names. "Dr. Evans, urological oncologist." The word hung in the air between us, ugly and alien. He looked from the paper back to my face, his own expression a mixture of bewilderment and a dawning, sickening understanding. "Urological? That's kidneys, right? What does this have to do with me? Or our ultrasound?" I took a deep breath, the air burning my lungs. "When you leaned over me to look at the screen, the ultrasound probe, it saw inside you. Just for a second. It saw your kidney, Mark." I couldn't bring myself to say the word tumor. Not yet. I just pointed to his right side, just below his ribs. "She saw something on your kidney. She said it was urgent, that you need to see this specialist immediately." He stared at me, his face draining of all color. He looked down at the spot I'd pointed to, as if he could feel the monster lurking there. For a long moment, he was silent. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, each tick an agonizing beat in our suspended reality. I could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to connect the dots of this impossible story. "So, let me get this straight," he said finally, his voice unnaturally calm. "We went for an ultrasound for our baby.
I leaned over.
And a doctor I've never met is now telling my wife that I have kidney cancer." He said the word, cancer. It sounded obscene coming from his lips. "Based on a grainy, accidental picture from a baby scan? Sarah, that's insane. Sounds like something out of a movie. It has to be a mistake." "I saw the picture, Mark," I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. "It's not a mistake." He sank onto the sofa, the paper still clutched in his hand. He ran his other hand through his hair, his composure finally beginning to crack. "But I don't feel sick. I have no pain. Nothing. How can this be happening?" The doctor said. She said these things can grow for years without any symptoms. She called it an incidental finding. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a fear I had never seen in him before. It was a raw, primal terror that hollowed out his handsome features and aged him a decade in a single minute. "Stage 4, he said, the words a hoarse whisper. It wasn't a question. He had connected the dots. Specialist.
Urgent.
No symptoms. He knew. I just nodded, unable to speak as a fresh wave of grief washed over me. He held out his arms, and I collapsed into them, burying my face in his chest. We clung to each other on the sofa, two people cast adrift from the life we knew just 24 hours ago. He held the back of my head, stroking my hair, comforting me, even as his own world was crumbling. That was Mark. Always my protector, always my rock, even when he was the one who needed saving. After a few minutes that felt like an eternity, he pulled back, his face set with a grim resolve. "Okay," he said, his voice stronger now. "Okay, we're not going to panic. We're going to be logical. We'll call this Dr. Singh. We'll get the scans. We'll get a real diagnosis. One step at a time." He stood up, pulling me with him. One step at a time. The next few days were a blur of sterile corridors, the low hum of medical machinery, and hushed, somber conversations. Dr. Singh, a kind-faced man with empathetic eyes, saw us immediately. He listened to our bizarre story without a flicker of disbelief, his expression growing more serious with every word. He ordered a CT scan for the very next morning. The 24 hours we spent waiting for that scan, and then for the results, were the longest of our lives. We didn't talk much. We just held hands, our unspoken fears a third presence in every room. The call came while we were sitting in our kitchen, pretending to eat lunch. It was Dr. Singh. Mark put the phone on speaker, and his hand found mine across the table, his grip like iron. "Mark, I have the results of your CT scan back from the radiologist," Dr. Singh began, his tone carefully neutral. "The scan confirms the presence of a large mass on your right kidney. It measures approximately 11 centimeters. It is consistent with a renal cell carcinoma." The air punched out of my lungs. Mark's grip tightened, his knuckles white. "The good news," Dr. Singh continued, and the phrase sounded absurd, "is that the primary tumor appears to be contained within the kidney's capsule. However, the scan also shows several small lesions. There's one on the adjacent adrenal gland and 2 on your liver." My blood ran cold. Lesions. Liver. I knew what that meant. "What does that mean, doctor?" Mark asked, his voice steady despite the tremor I could feel running through his hand. There was a pause. "It means the cancer has metastasized, Mark. It has spread beyond the kidney. This confirms a stage 4 diagnosis. I've already sent the scans over to Dr. Evans. His office will be calling you within the hour to schedule a consultation." "I'm so very sorry." The rest of the conversation was a blur of medical jargon, biopsies, treatment plans, immunotherapy, prognosis, words that meant nothing and everything all at once. When Mark hung up, he sat in silence for a long time, staring at the wall. I watched him, my heart breaking with every breath I took. I saw him process the verdict, saw the flicker of denial, the wave of anger, the crushing weight of despair. And then, I saw something else settle in his eyes, a fierce, unyielding determination. He turned to me, his gaze intense. "This doesn't change anything, Sarah," he said, his voice low and firm. "It's a fight, that's all. And I am going to fight. For you. For this baby." He placed his hand on my stomach. "I am going to be there to teach him how to throw a baseball. I am going to be there to walk her down the aisle. Do you understand me? This is not a death sentence. It's a challenge." His strength was awe-inspiring. In the face of the worst news imaginable, he was still thinking of us. He was still my rock. I leaned in and kissed him, pouring all my love, my fear, and my own resolve into it. "I know you will," I whispered against his lips. "And I'll be right here with you, every step of the way." The call from Dr. Evans' office came as promised. The consultation was scheduled for 2 days later. The appointment felt like a date with destiny, the moment our new, terrifying reality would be laid bare. We walked into the oncologist's office hand in hand, a united front against the storm. Dr. Evans was a tall, imposing man with a no-nonsense demeanor. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. He pulled up the CT scans on a large monitor, the bright, cross-sectioned images of Mark's torso lighting up the dim room. "Mr. Jensen, Mrs. Jensen," he began, pointing to the screen. "As you know, we are dealing with a stage 4 renal cell carcinoma. The primary tumor is large, but the bigger concern is the metastasis to the liver and adrenal gland. Standard procedure would be a radical nephrectomy to remove the kidney, followed by systemic immunotherapy to target the metastatic lesions. It's an aggressive treatment for an aggressive cancer." "What are the chances?" Mark asked, his voice betraying none of the fear I knew he felt. 5-year survival rates for this stage are traditionally around 10 to 15%, Dr. Evans stated bluntly. I felt the floor drop out from under me. 10 to 15%. He was giving my husband, my vibrant 34-year-old husband, a death sentence with statistics. But Dr. Evans wasn't finished. He clicked to a different screen, a file filled with text. It looked like Mark's medical history. However, he said, and my head snapped up. In reviewing your full medical file, which we pulled from the national database, I found something. Something that changes the entire picture. Your husband had genetic testing done about 5 years ago, as part of a research study. I looked at Mark, confused. He seemed just as baffled. A research study? I vaguely remember that from my old job. They were testing for, I don't know, hereditary conditions or something. They were, Dr. Evans confirmed, his eyes fixed on the screen. And your results showed that you are a carrier for a very rare genetic mutation. It's called VHL syndrome.
Von Hippel-Lindau disease.
He finally looked up from the monitor, his gaze settling not on Mark, but on me. His expression was unreadable, a strange mix of clinical detachment and something else, something that looked like profound concern. This changes things, he said slowly. VHL syndrome means the tumors are likely to be slow-growing, and it opens up different, more targeted treatment paths. But it's a hereditary condition, passed down from a parent. And more importantly, Mrs. Jensen, he paused, his eyes boring into mine, it has significant implications for any biological children. He turned back to his screen, clicking through a few more files before stopping. He looked at Mark, then back at me. According to this file, your father passed away from a brain aneurysm 10 years ago, Mark. But the record also shows that your biological mother is listed as unknown. He took a deep breath, and the professional mask he wore seemed to fall away, revealing a man about to deliver a blow even more devastating than the first. He looked directly at me, his voice soft but clear. Sarah, I know this is going to be a shock, but I pulled your file as well. It's standard practice when dealing with hereditary conditions and a pregnancy. I saw your birth records. I saw your mother's name, and I saw the name she listed for your biological father. It's the same name as the man who adopted Mark. The sterile, quiet office suddenly felt like a vacuum, sucking all the air and sound from the universe. Dr. Evans' words hung there, nonsensical and monstrous. The same name as the man who adopted Mark. I stared at him, my mind refusing to assemble the letters into a coherent thought. It was a riddle, a cruel joke. Couldn't be reality. I turned to Mark, expecting to see the same shell-shocked confusion on his face. But what I saw instead sent a tremor of pure ice through my veins. He wasn't looking at the doctor. He was staring at me, his face a pale, ghostly mask, his eyes wide with a horror that was not of confusion, but of dawning, gut-wrenching recognition. Mark, I whispered, my voice a thread. What is he talking about? Mark didn't answer. He just kept staring at me, his mouth slightly agape, as if seeing me for the first time. It was in that look, in the catastrophic crumbling of his expression, that the impossible truth began to coalesce in my mind. My father, my wonderful, kind, loving father, who had raised me on his own after my mother left when I was a baby. The man who taught me how to ride a bike and bait a fishing hook. The man whose last name I bore. Mark had never met him. He'd passed away from what we were told was a sudden brain aneurysm just a year before we met. Mark's story was different. He was adopted as an infant. He knew his adoptive father's name, of course, a man he'd never met, who had signed away his rights and vanished. It was a piece of trivia in his life, a name on a form. But now that name was a wrecking ball, swinging through the foundations of our world. No, I breathed, shaking my head, a frantic denial bubbling up in my throat. No, that's not possible. My father, your adoptive father. It's a coincidence. It has to be a common name. Dr. Evans' face was a mask of deep, professional sorrow. It's not a common name, Mrs. Jensen, he said softly. And we confirmed the date of birth and social security number from both files. They match. The man who raised you is the same man who signed Mark's adoption papers. The room began to spin. The clinical white walls, the ominous scans on the screen, the doctor's grim face. It all blurred into a sickening vortex. Mark's father had an affair. He'd had a child, Mark, and given him up for adoption. And then, years later, my mother had an affair with the same man. My father. She'd left, and he'd raised me, never breathing a word of his other son. The secret he'd carried to his grave was the reason I was now pregnant with my half-brother's child. The weight of it was crushing, a physical pressure on my chest that made it impossible to breathe. Our love story, the thing I cherished most in the world, was suddenly twisted into something grotesque. A Greek tragedy we had unknowingly been starring in. Our perfect, longed-for baby, a product of incest. I felt a wave of nausea so powerful I had to grip the arms of the chair to keep from collapsing. Mark finally moved. He pushed his chair back, the sound scraping harshly in the silence, and walked over to the window, turning his back to me. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the rigid line of his spine. He was shutting down, retreating into a place I couldn't reach. The silence that followed was more agonizing than any scream. We were two strangers in a room, our shared past now a toxic minefield. Dr. Evans cleared his throat, pulling my attention back. "I know this is an unimaginable shock," he said, his voice laced with an empathy that felt both kind and intrusive. "But from a medical standpoint, this changes our immediate course of action. VHL is an autosomal dominant condition. This means there was a 50% chance your father passed it to each of you. Mark, you clearly inherited it. Sarah, we need to test you immediately. And the fetus." He looked at me, his gaze softening. "This disease can cause tumors not just in the kidneys, but in the brain, spine, and eyes. It is vital that we know if your baby is affected." The baby, our little bean, the innocent life at the center of this nightmare. A fierce, primal wave of protectiveness washed over me, momentarily eclipsing the horror. My child. Our child. The biology was a catastrophe, a social taboo of the highest order, but the love that created this baby was real. It was pure. It was everything. I looked at Mark's back, at the man I loved more than life itself. The man who was my husband. The man who was my brother. Could those two truths coexist? I didn't know. All I knew was that the man standing at the window was suffering. He was scared, and he was the father of my child. "Mark," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He didn't turn around. "Mark, look at me." Slowly he turned. His face was ravaged, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked lost. "What are we, Sarah?" he asked, his voice raw. "What does this make us?" I stood up and walked to him, my legs feeling like lead. I stopped in front of him and reached out, taking his hand. It was cold and limp in mine. "It makes us two people who fell in love," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "Two people who built a life together. Two people who are having a baby. Nothing that happened before we met can change that. None of this is our fault." He looked down at our joined hands, and then back up at my face. A single tear escaped his eye and tracked down his cheek, the same way it had in the ultrasound room, in what felt like a different lifetime. "Our baby, Sarah," he whispered. "What if? Then we will fight for our baby?" I cut in, squeezing his hand. "The same way we are going to fight for you. We will do the testing. We will face the results. And we will handle whatever comes next together. You and me. That is what we are." That moment was the turning point. It wasn't a magic fix. The horror didn't just evaporate. But in that office, faced with an unthinkable reality, we made a choice. We chose love over shame, unity over the chaos that threatened to tear us apart. The weeks that followed were the hardest of our lives. We underwent the genetic testing. The results came back. I had not inherited the VHL gene. A wave of relief so profound it brought me to my knees washed over me. Our baby, our precious child, was safe. The curse had ended with Mark. It was the first piece of good news we'd had, a glimmer of light in the suffocating darkness. Mark began his treatment, the targeted therapy, specific to his VHL mutation, worked better than anyone had dared to hope. It wasn't a cure, but it shrunk the tumors. It bought us time. Years, the doctor said, maybe even decades. His diagnosis was no longer a death sentence, but a chronic condition to be managed. We told no one. The secret of our shared parentage was a burden we decided to bear alone. It was our truth, our cross, and sharing it would only invite judgment and confusion into a life that was already complicated enough. To the world, we remained Mark and Sarah, a devoted couple facing a health crisis together. And in our home, in the quiet moments, that is what we were. The other truth was a ghost that lived with us, sometimes silent in the corner, sometimes screaming in our minds, but we learned to live alongside it. 7 months later, I gave birth to a perfectly healthy baby boy. We named him Leo. The moment they placed him in Mark's arms, I watched my husband's face transform. The fear, the shadows, the weight of the last year. It all melted away, replaced by the same pure, unadulterated awe I had seen in the ultrasound room. He looked down at our son, then up at me, his eyes shining with tears of gratitude. Our life is not the perfect one I once thought it was. It's messy, it's complicated, and it's shadowed by secrets and sickness. But it is also filled with a love so fierce and so tested that it feels unbreakable. Every morning, I wake up next to my husband, the bravest man I know. We drink coffee and talk about Leo's latest milestone. We fight Mark's cancer together, one appointment, one scan at a time. We are a family. And as I watch Mark on the floor, patiently showing our son how to stack his blocks, I know, with every fiber of my being, that we made the right choice. We chose each other. We chose our son. We chose love, in all its complicated, messy, and improbable glory.